Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be painting up the League of Votann. More specifically, I'm going to start off with Uthar the Destined. I assembled up to the point that it would get in the way of painting. The terrain piece is separate, the head and the body is separate, and those are the only separate things. The body was a very weird mix of interconnecting pieces, and so I could have had the cape, several plugs, and his arms and stuff separate, but that would make it a bit tedious and probably would get problems in the way. And so I decided that it would be less trouble to try to paint around everything than to have it fully disassembled. And so basically I've just glued everything. It's just broken down to three parts: the main body and everything, the head, and then the terrain piece. And then I primed that all with Bright Touch General Purpose Gray Car Primer. And these are all the paints that I used in this painting session, except for 2 oil paints because I accidentally put them back and I forgot to grab them. Alright, with Liquitex modeling putty, we're going to apply some putty onto the base. Now while the model is drying from being primed, we're going to apply a bunch of this on and then smooth it out. And once we apply it all, we're then going to rapidly dry the top with a hair dryer. This will make the top flexible and workable, but not like wet and sticky. And if we press too hard, we can actually get to the wet sticky stuff. So basically, we're going to dry off the top, and then we're going to take like a dry brush, and then we're just going to tap everywhere to create like texture. And based off the base, it sort of looked like a moon, or like the moon ground, like the moon. And so I was like, I want to keep that aesthetic. And so then I placed the terrain piece in the middle just to get a little indent of it there so that it'll fit perfectly well next time. But I don't want it too big of a dent, otherwise it'll be too obvious when I glue it in. Now with Eshin Gray, Gray Sear, and White Scar White, we're going to paint the undercoat. So we're going to take an airbrush, and with Eshin Gray we're going to paint the underside at a 45-degree angle under. Then we're going to take Gray Sear and we will apply this at a 45-degree downwards from above. Then we'll take White Scar White and a tiny dry brush, and we will dry brush actually very few things actually. The hoses that he has, his weapons just as a guide, and like the edges of his armor plate. This actually takes a while because due to the smooth curvature of a lot of his armor plates, the dry brushing isn't actually going to do nothing. So we want to just focus on lightly dry brushing the very edges of each plate of his armor as best we can, and his pants as well. This is mostly going to be for a guiding line, and of course his head. Honestly, there's very little dry brushing that actually works in here. A lot of it's just to build like a guiding line for later. And I don't show it, but I go back with a little bit of a brush and just highlight a few lines here and there that I couldn't get really well because the angles of the model. Alright, somehow I did not get a picture of the colors I used, but basically I used 2 bright colors, Cybrite Green, which is a very light green, and Baharoth Blue, which is a light blue. And I mixed them together to create this bluish turquoise color, somewhat greenish. And then I mixed it with Lamian Medium in my usual mix to create it into sort of a wash, and I applied it all over the armor. Alright, now with the only 2 oil paints I use, Viridian Hue and French Ultramarine, I create a mix to create this turquoise-like mix. It's mostly Viridian Hue and a little bit of French Ultramarine mixed with some mineral spirits to create the wash. And so I do a basic application. I apply it all over the armor, I rapidly dry it with a hairdryer, then I wipe it off with a makeup sponge, and then I apply a second coat again to create some better shadows and stuff. And then I lightly wipe the major areas with the makeup sponge, especially on the flat plates and stuff, and this like smooths out the color. And it was okay, but it was missing something. Then I go and I do a pure wash of French Ultramarine all over, and it works pretty well. And then I do a light wiping of that, and it looks pretty good actually. Alright, now with Corvus Black, Dawnstone, and Eshin Grey, we're going to paint his boots and gloves. So we're going to start off with a base layer of Corvus Black. And it was watered down enough so that the pre-coating was able to show through. However, the light color of the pre-coating isn't strong enough showing through, so we're going to highlight it. So then we go to Dawnstone and we paint all the edges of everything on his boots, and as best we can his gloves. They took a bunch of paint, so they need to be highlighted. It's a little difficult to do that. Or no, I used Eshin Grey, sorry. And then I went to Dawnstone as the final highlight, highlighting the very edges of his boots, the lines, and then as best I can, the hands. The hands was really me guessing because I could barely see where his, the lighting and shadowing on his fingers were. Alright, with Grace here, Uthar Grey, and Pallid Witchflesh, we are going to paint his cloth, his pants, and the inside of his cape. And the reason why he has pants is definitely the reason why he has a 3-up armor save and not a 2-up. But basically, so we're going to apply Grace here all over the inside of his cape and his clothing and stuff, and as the base layer, because the oil washes and all the stuff around has spilled over, and this is very strong and can take care of it. However, after applying it all over, I realized it's really hard to see the folds of his pants and clothing. So what I do is I take a mix of Nuln Oil with Lamian Medium. The Lamian Medium helps it flow much better, and I apply it on all his pants and the few cloths part on the joints of his armor. And this allows me to better see the shadowing and stuff. So this is more like creating a guide, more like than actually using it as for its painting. Then I take Grace here again, re-highlight everything. Then I take Uthar Grey and apply this everywhere. I want to note that the Nuln Oil and Lamian Medium I do not use on the cape. There's no point. And then finally I do a final highlight everywhere with Pallid Witchflesh on the most raised areas and thin lines, on the most raised, most prominent areas, and it looks pretty good. Alright, with Corn Red, Mephiston Red, Evil Sun Scarlet, and Troll Slayer Orange, we're going to paint the backside of his cape. So with Corn Red, we're going to apply this as our base layer everywhere. We will then take Mephiston Red, water down a bit, and we will apply it on basically 90 to 95% of every part of the cloak. Only the deepest folds will have the Corn Red still in it. Then we'll take Evil Sun Scarlet mixed with water, and then we will place it 60 to 70% of all the Mephiston Red we painted, focusing on the more raised areas. And then we'll take Troll Slayer Orange with a good amount of water and we'll paint it on the edges of the cloak. Now, I wanted to focus more on moving away from Lamian Medium for a lot of things and just use more water like the GW pros do, because it's an interesting thing and it's a bit cheaper to constantly do. But in this case, the Troll Slayer Orange was far too strong of a contrast to everything else, and the end result is the cape looked too meh, too strong. It just looked bad. Alright, with Doombull Brown Nuln Oil, I don't show it here but I do use it, we're going to paint the handles on his sword. He has one on his left hand and he has one on his right hip. And so basically we're going to apply the Doombull all throughout. However, so because of where they are, they've been hit already. If it was just the pre-coating, this would be fine, but it's been hit with like the turquoise colors and oil paints because it just bled over, despite my best efforts. So we then take Nuln Oil, apply it to create some extra shadows, and then we apply the Doombull Brown again on the, well, as best we can, the edges of each of these pieces of the handle. It has like some intricate, I don't know how to describe it, but like patterns on it. Alright, now with Mournfang Brown, Nuln Oil, and XV88, what we're going to do is we're going to paint the, he has like the scabbard of his sword and his little leather pouch on the left. So we're going to start off with the base layer of Mournfang Brown. Then we're going to apply a layer of Nuln Oil. Then we're going to highlight the entire thing, the edges and some of the more open flat planes with Mournfang Brown. Then we're going to apply another layer of Nuln Oil. Then we're going to re-highlight the edges and a little bit of the center pieces so that there is some transition of color. Then we're going to take a 1-to-1 mix of Mournfang and XV88 and we're going to highlight the edges of everything. And then we're going to take a little bit of XV88 and highlight the most raised and prominent edges of this stuff to make a pretty good focal point of light. Alright, now with Corvus Black, Dawnstone, and Baharoth Blue, we're going to paint the gun he has, the outer casing. So we're going to start off with Corvus Black, we're going to apply this all over. As best the casing, as far as I can guess what is the casing. And then with Dawnstone, we're going to highlight all the edges of it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do a 1-to-1 mix of Dawnstone and Baharoth Blue. And then we're going to apply this on the most raised, most prominent parts of the edge. And then I'm going to finish with a little bit of Baharoth glue on the most raised, most prominent lines and edges of this gun, as best I can. And later I go back with Corvus Black and just fill in the black squares and stuff in order to make it look more sharper. And also, for some reason earlier I did this technique where I used Baharoth blue on the gray, and I just forgot to mention, even though there was a whole video, little clip of it happening, but on his boots, the front of his boots, I highlighted the tips of his boots with his Baharoth blue mixed with Dawnstone to create a bluish thing. I saw it on the box, and I was like, you know, I'll try it. And so I gave a bluish hue highlight to this dark black and gray. Alright, now with Dawnstone, Baharoth Blue, and XV88, we're going to paint his base. Now I'm going to start with Dawnstone, and I'm going to water it down a bit so that the highlighting or dry brushing of what I've done before shines through, and so that it lets a little bit of the white from the modeling putty show through as well. And then with very diluted Baharoth Blue. Actually, the best way to think of it is I got a little bit of Baharoth Blue in my water, and then I apply this all over. This applies a very thin, light bluish hue to everything. And then I go back with XV88 using the same thing, or same method. Basically, I got a little bit of XV88 inside my water, and I apply this very thinly around stones and stuff. I dry my brush, and then I like suck up some of the excess wherever it spills. Basically, I just want to change like a color or a tone in some areas. Now the color and tones were good, but I needed to bring it to the next level. So to make it look like the moon better, I took Gray Seer and then I just dry brushed it all over, and it pretty much worked well. And now with Gorthor Brown, Cadian Flesh Tone, and Pallid Witch Flesh, we're going to paint the skin, the guy's head. Now, interestingly, this character's head has these gigantic cracks in his skin. These aren't scars, looking at it, there are straight up cracks. His skin is cracked heavily, even in the back of the head. So these are not scars, or at least they're the ritualistic scars because they're so strange. So basically we paint the whole head with Gorthor brown. And then we're going to take Cadian flesh tone and we're going to highlight everything. Think of it like scales, like he has scales. His ears even are broken up into little pieces. And so this is mostly just taking some watered down Cadian flesh tone and doing very light taps on all the places that the paint flows out. Make sure you tip your brush onto a paper towel to absorb any excess water, moisture, or any paint that would flow out easy. And we just do taps on the head as best we can to apply the color. And so after this, I mix Pallid Witch Flesh into the Cadian Flesh Tone, re-highlight, and I do it with more Pallid Witch Flesh on a third coating. And I can't really show this feature because the scales got so small that I had to hold this thing very close to my face and I could not film it. And so I tried to take progressive pictures of where it would go between heads, but the lighting was so bright that you couldn't really see any of the differences between the pictures. Just take my word for it, it got painted. But how I painted it was basically, I painted like the edges of each scale towards the front, or the top or the front. If it's the side of the head, the top. If it's the front of the head or the top, very top of the head, I painted the highlights closer towards the front of the face. If that makes any sense to you. And then with Dawnstone and Grace here, we're going to paint his beard. So we're going to apply a layer of Dawnstone all throughout. Then we're going to do a 1-to-1 mix of Dawnstone and Grace here and highlight as best as I can the lines of the beard, they're very small, and the bottom parts of his beard. And then with pure Grace here, with tiny dots, just tap little tiny dots to create the detail, to create the lines. The finest lines I can on the folds of his beard. It's hard to describe. The model has basically like these channels and stuff. And then very tiny dots on his mustache and tip of his beard. And I couldn't show this on camera because it is so tiny that like I could not film it because I had to have him like right next to my eye. So basically I took some Thunderhawk blue, watered it down a bit, and with a very tiny brush tapped it against a paper towel to absorb the excess water and stuff, and then I lightly just tapped and pressed it into his eyes. I'm not really making his eyelids, but more like the area around it have a different color, and it kind of works with the model that small. It kind of attracts the eyes to the your gaze goes to his eyes because you notice that there's a little different color there instead of just a black-brown pit. Alright, with Mephiston Red, Evil Sun Scarlet, Trollslayer Orange, and Lamian Medium, we are repainting the coat. So I take Mephiston Red and then I apply Lamian Medium to it, and then I basically cover everything except the small slivers of Corn Red that are there. And with that out of the way, we then take Evil Sun Scarlet mixed with Lamian Medium, and then we apply this on like 50 to 60%, maybe 70% of each batch of Mephiston Red that was applied. And so focusing on the highlights, the edges and stuff. And the Lamian Medium makes the color transition far more smooth, no sharp color transitions. And then with Trollslayer Orange, we added a good amount of Lamian Medium. So what we did was we actually mixed. We did a 50-50 mix of Evil Sun Scarlet and Trollslayer Orange mixed with some Lamian Medium, because the Trollslayer Orange is too much of a jump, and so this 50-50 mix with Lamian Medium added in to smooth it out made the color transitions much better, so I focused on the most fine highlights and most edges and stuff. And in some cases I did like a second coat on the most raised, highest folds with the Trollslayer Orange to make it more clear and obvious. But basically there was no pure Trollslayer Orange, only a mix of Trollslayer Orange and Evil Sun Scarlet with Lamian Medium to help it flow better and make it more translucent. Alright, with Corvus Black and Ishin Grey, we're just going to paint these little like tubes that are around here, like one connecting to his gun, his sword has one feeding into itself for some reason, and some along his boots. Basically Corvus Black along the cord length, and then Ishin Grey sort of as a highlight towards where the light would be. And now with all the non-metallics out of the way, with AK Interactive Ultramatte Varnish, we then apply this all over to seal and protect it in, and also to get rid of any excess shine from washes and such. Alright then, with Warp Block Bronze, Retributor Armor, and Liberator Gold, we're going to paint the, well, gold. So essentially with Warp Block Bronze, he has like these like rune mark thingies around his armor, so this is going to be the base layer. We're going to water it down enough so that it flows into the crevices as best we can. And then we're going to highlight all of them with Retributor Armor with a very fine brush and very carefully. You can sort of do an overbrush technique, which is similar to dry brushing but not as big, onto a lot of the gold lettering to make sure it stands out. And then with Liberator Gold, we will then paint the, as best we can, the most raised areas of these runes. They're very small, so Liberator Gold might not even be noticeable. You never know. And then in some cases I kind of spilled over, it didn't look so good, so I took the Warp Block Bronze again and like spot treated some areas where it wasn't good enough, where the Retributor Gold or the gold color spilled over a little bit in some areas, so this was a fix. Alright then, with Vallejo metal acrylic colors with exhaust manifold and duraluminum, which is basically a black metal or a dark metal and a bright silver, we're going to paint the metals. So the reason why I did such a contrast of this and not like something in between is because a lot of the metal pieces are so small that if you have any transitional colors, you're not really going to notice it, and so a stark contrast will actually make it visible. So basically on parts of the gun, these hoses he has, some part of his base, and stuff like that, we paint with exhaust manifold, and then we just highlight with duraluminum. And then we assemble the entire model. Alright, with Averland Sunset and Uriel Yellow, we're going to paint this one detail I missed. So, he has like this light in the center of his chest thing. So it's like, okay, paint it with a darker yellow, and then highlight with a drop of the bright yellow. Easy, simple, done. Alright, with Evil Sun Scarlet, Trollslayer Orange, Uriel Yellow, and Pallid Witch Flesh, we're going to paint their sword. So I wanted to wait till it was fully assembled so I could easily hold the model. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to paint the blade with Evil Sun Scarlet as a base. Now essentially all I'm going to do with Trollslayer Orange, Uriel Yellow, and Pallid Witch Flesh is essentially I'm just going to do feathering. I'm basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a brush and then I'm going to just paint straight lines, and I'm going to go from one part of the blade all the way up to the tip. And this feathering is going to help with blending in the colors a little bit, add a little randomness to it, and I'm just going to go from Trollslayer Orange to Uriel Yellow and Pallid Witch Flesh. Now the thing is, the Trollslayer Orange is going to start like 3/4 of the way up, Uriel Yellow is going to start around halfway up, and Pallid Witch Flesh is going to be close to halfway up along the tip. And yeah, and basically just feathering the colors in, and it looks okay. I don't know, I'm trying to copy it. I didn't look at the actual way to paint this. I kind of wanted to wing it, and I'll probably look at it later. And done. And so now we have what someone looks like some guy on the moon with brass shell casings there for some reason, despite him using a gun that really doesn't look like it uses shell casings, but whatever. So this is my first League of Votann guy. Pretty interesting model, considering this guy is supposed to be around 5 feet tall, yet I'm pretty sure model-wise he's almost as big as a Terminator. That makes no sense. He should come up to their waist. Well, anyway. Interesting model. It took me a lot longer to paint this. I don't know, it's just like getting around to it. I tried some new things with the highlighting bluish with black and gray. So his black boots, his black gun, his black gloves. The metal, or the sword, is interesting, but is something. The turquoise armor, I tried to match the box, but this was a little meh. I didn't exactly get the colors right because I don't have turquoise, because for some reason blue is like almost never painted. There's almost nothing to paint blue unless you have an army color scheme that uses that. So I had to make do with it, but it's a bit interesting of a model kit. Kind of strange. How do I put it? The Votann army so far looks like a little bit like generic sci-fi, which is a bit weird. It looks a little bit 40k-ish, but like, I don't know. Their art style is a little odd, I say. It's kind of a little generic space-wise. But anyway, as far as how I did on the model, some things I did well, some things I didn't. I'm probably just going to have to say, basically I fixed up their cape so it looked much better. So I'm going to say just a simple 8 out of 10. Probably on the low end of quality. Yeah, a basic 8 out of 10. The base looks great though. I'm going to give it that. Looks like the moon. And yeah, it's a wonderful piece. An 8 out of 10. Very interesting. I'm glad GW like took 5 days to nerf it. I mean, I didn't even finish this model kit in the time it took them to nerf everything. Surprisingly, even though I have the codex and I was reading the book, even though it was like on paper and you can't really tell how good a model is on paper, I looked at the model and I saw how many points it cost before the nerf. 120 points. I knew that they screwed up big time. I was looking at him as like, he should be at least 190 points minimum for all the things he offers, all that he does, and all the buffs he gives and everything. That was ridiculous. But they kind of patched it now, maybe. I don't know. We'll see how things go with the tournament play. If I ever play this army. Kind of cool. I mean, I do have the box set. Alright then. Well, if you like the video, share it if you want to share, comment if you want to comment, and more to come soon. I have a whole box set of these guys to knock out. Alright, bye.